Ross. I'm the Executive Director of One Wisconsin Now. We're a statewide advocacy organization in Madison, Wisconsin, with a mission with Wisconsin with equal economic opportunity for all. We're also committed to ensuring that our elections are fair, are clean, are accurate, and then everyone who is an eligible voter who wants to participate in our elections has that opportunity. We come before you under the gravest of circumstances. Information that we have obtained, including audio recordings, documents, and strategy memoranda, leads us to believe that there is a coordinated plot underway between the Republican Party of Wisconsin, the Americans for Prosperity, and organizations in the so-called Tea Party movement. We're targeting minority voters and college students in a possibly illegal voter caging effort to suppress the vote. Now, One Wisconsin Now is providing all of the evidence that we have received on this wrongdoing to federal and state authorities so that they can investigate to ensure justice and democracy prevail. One Wisconsin Now will today be providing this information to the U.S. Attorney's Office of the Western District, the Voter Integrity Task Force headed by Attorney General J.B. Van Hollen, and the Government Accountability Board, demanding a full investigation to ensure the right to vote is not stolen by these plans. Now, the nonpartisan Brennan Center for Justice outlines the process of voter caging. Quote, voter caging is the practice of sending mail to addresses on the voter rolls, compiling a list of the mail that is returned undeliverable, and using that list to purge or challenge voter registrations on the grounds that the voters on the list do not legally reside at their registered addresses. Supporters of voter caging defend the practice as a means of preventing votes cast by ineligible voters. Voter caging, however, is notoriously unreliable. If treated unjustifiably as the sole basis for determining that a voter is eligible or does not live at the address at which he or she is registered, it can lead to the unwarranted purge or challenge of eligible voters. Moreover, the practice has been often targeted at minority voters, making the effects even more pernicious. Now, One Wisconsin Now obtained an audio recording. It is verified as authentic from a June 16, 2010 meeting between the leaders of the state's Tea Party movement, led by Tim Dake, the head of Grandsons of Liberty. Dake serves as a regular spokesperson for Wisconsin's Tea Party organizations and is widely viewed as the movement's Wisconsin leader. Now, the full audio available at One Wisconsin Now's voter protection website, www.savewisconsinsvote2010.org, details the plans for coordinated voter suppression efforts, which is anchored in challenging the voter eligibility on Election Day, November 2nd. So, according to the statements that are made on the recording, Dake lays out the plans detailing contact between himself and Rance Priebus, the chair of the Republican Party of Wisconsin, and Mark Block, the state director of Americans for Prosperity, Wisconsin. Now, it goes as this. The Republican Party will use its voter vault, statewide voter file, to compile a list of minority and student voters in targeted Wisconsin communities. Americans for Prosperity will use this list to send mailings to these voters indicating the voter must call and confirm their registration information and telling them, if they do not call the number provided, that they could be removed from the voter lists. The Tea Party organizations will recruit and place individuals as official poll workers in selected municipalities in order to be able to make the challenges as official poll workers. And on Election Day, these organizations will then make use of these postcards that are returned as undeliverable to challenge voters at the polls, utilizing law enforcement as well as attorneys trained and provided by the Republican Party of Wisconsin to support these challenges. Now, at this time, we're going to play a series of recordings. I'm going to ask Robert to bring up our audio so that you can listen to the microphones here. Now, the press packet that you've received has a transcript of these in it. The press release, if you want to read along. Is there anyone who doesn't have the packet? Anna, could we get one here, please? So we'll start at the top. There are 4 recordings we're going to play, but again, the entire transcription, the entire audio is available at savewisconsinsvote2010.org.
And we'll also send around these selected MP3 files so you can easily reference these with the materials in the packet. Number one.
Okay.
So what we're hoping is that the various groups in the coalition, plus Americans for Prosperity, and Mark Block has been in on this, and the Republican Party, this comes along with the top lines previously said, we're in, and there's a reason why these guys are volunteering to work this. They have access to what they call voter roll, the records of voting. They can go in there and look for lapsed voters. They can go and compare lists of voters and say, oh, look at this. This person is registered in this county, this county, this county, this county, and do something about it. So we're talking about a broad base support behind this idea. What they're offering is training.
And that was Tim Dake, and he continues.
I assure you he continues.
They're offering to do the training. It's not going to cost anything, but what we're looking at is statewide, getting our groups involved, getting people, like my group has got a 2,700 person email list. We want to hit that and see how many of these people can we get involved in this one project. And the idea would be at some point to go in on September 14th and November 2nd, have these people involved and doing poll watching and checking. There's some consultants that have offered to step up. We're watching stepping up, the Attorney Republican Party.
And then later in the presentation, this is...
We're watching?
I'm sorry?
Who's we're watching?
We're watching Wisconsin. It's, I believe the one's name is Artist Cherney. They're an organization. They're a Republican Party affiliated organization. And then we continue.
Okay, poll watchers, what you can do is you can call in a lawyer. And there's the Republican Party. This is one of the things they're offering. They say they will have their lawyers stand by so that if you call and say you're poll watching in Neil's Corners and you see something clearly fraudulent, they will send a lawyer out right away and come out there and be able to tell this court, here's the deal, here's the law, this is what we expect, bring the police in, make their complaint, that sort of thing. So they've got that. You can challenge a voter through the precinct captain. This is one of the things they'll teach how to do is anybody can challenge a voter. And since the voter law did not get passed this year, that could hit you with $100,000 in 3 years for unsuccessfully challenging a voter, we can still do this. Hallelujah.
And then our last part of the recording, as you heard someone shout at hallelujah regarding the failure to pass the Voter Protection Act.
So we're talking about AFP is willing to fund doing a mass mailing to registered voters on this about getting them involved with this, making sure that their voter information is current because people periodically need to go back and check. I found, before I bought the house, I did 4 years ago, we lived in a brand new condo, first people to live in it. I went to vote and found 12 people registered in my address. And my wife and I were the only people who lived there. Yet 12 people were registered to vote. I couldn't believe it. They said, wow, you must have a big family. And I'm looking at the names going, no, there's nobody named Nguyen and Din and that sort of thing in my family. So that's the kind of thing we need to clean up. People need to be aware of that. Go ahead and check. Who else is registry replaced? Ask to have them tossed off. Work with the media on this and then the district attorneys. We try to get them involved early and get them fired up about this and say, look, we know you're short-handed. We're hands, we're boots on the ground. We will help you. We just bring the weight of the law behind us. One of the things we're going to do is take these addresses that people give, and we want to send out a postcard that says, you need to call and confirm this. And if you haven't called, well then it could get tossed out. But we want to, and what we're also looking for is when you send these cards out, they'll come back if it's an undeliverable address.
Now, the possible illegality of the Republican Party of Wisconsin, Americans for Prosperity, and Tea Party plot that won Wisconsin now lays out in the request for investigation to law to law officials several points. First, federal law prohibits racially targeted caging operations. Statements made during the June 16th meeting made clear that race is a motivating factor in the planned caging and challenge effort. Any efforts to deter qualified voters from voting based on their race must be immediately investigated and, if substantiated, stopped. Second, the organization's election day plans could put the state at possible risk for violating federal law. Federal law makes it clear that elector challenges cannot be solely based on returned mail. The organization's plans to recruit individuals to become poll workers in order to conduct challenges based on the returned mail would result in individuals acting unlawfully under color of state law. Third, federal law also makes it clear that private actors are similarly prohibited from challenging voters based solely on undelivered mail. Even if the challenge comes from a volunteer election observer, the challenge is unlawful if based on the voter's failure to respond to the mailing. Any challenge to an elector's eligibility based on unreliable grounds is an abuse of the right to challenge and violates state and federal law, subjecting the challenger to removal and other sanctions. Now, disturbingly, the mail program described by the Tea Party will contain false and misleading information. The Tea Party plans to tell certain voters that their name may be removed if they fail to call the telephone number provided. It would be illegal to remove a voter from the statewide voter database based on this reason. The deceptive nature of the planned mailing is particularly troubling because the mailing described would almost certainly appear to be an official government mailing. For the same reasons that it is unlawful to use official attire to challenge a voter at the polls on election day, it is unlawful to send a mailing that appears to be an official action of the government. And that is what we outlined in our request for investigation to the U.S. Attorney's Office of the Western District of Wisconsin, the Government Accountability Board, and the Election Integrity Task Force headed by Attorney General J.B. Van Hollen. Now, based on our discussions with legal counsel, we believe certain statements made at the Tea Party meeting clearly outline a plan by these organizations to engage in what may be potentially illegal conduct. The voter caging and challenge plans outlined by the Tea Party could result in an apparently illegal effort to deter qualified citizens from voting. As described, their plan would deter qualified citizens from voting in a manner that is coercive and without sufficient basis. All of these activities raise serious concerns and should be investigated to determine whether illegal activity has occurred. At this point in time, if you have questions, I would be happy to answer them. Start with Gil.
I didn't hear anything in there that really said they were targeting minorities.
Okay. In the transcript that we have provided for you, there's an additional discussion and quote about that. One from Tim Dake that I have right here. Quote, "You run into the racial thing. You have people screaming, 'Oh, you're denying the minorities the right to vote.' No, we're denying their right to vote multiple times."
Is that a recording too?
Yes, that's on the recording as well.
And
Where did these recordings come from, Scott, and how do we know that they're authentic?
We are not revealing the source of the recordings, but I have we have verified that they are, in fact, we have confirmed that they are, in fact, authentic, and consulted with legal counsel about the release of them, and it is all legal under the law.
But how can we confirm it?
I suppose you'll have to listen to the recordings and read the documents and determine for yourself whether or not you feel they're legal or not. Listen to the recordings. There are many interviews out there with Tim Dake on them, and you can listen and verify that way. I appreciate the question, though, and understand.
State law bars you from recording.
No, it does not.
Yes, it does.
Wisconsin is a one-party consent law state. It is a one-party consent law, and we have verified that the person who made this recording was in the room. Therefore, it's legal.
Is there any evidence that this was actually carried out? I mean, they talked about maybe doing it not only for the general election, but the primary as well, and this was back in June. So were these postcards mailed out, and were those people targeted at the polls?
We have not been able to verify if the mailing has gone out, but there is a plan in there that discusses more in detail exactly what they are doing that I'd ask you to consult with. And I guess the easiest way to confirm whether they did the mailing or not is to give Mark Block at the Americans for Prosperity and Rance Priebus a call and ask them about this coordinated effort.
You said the mailing resembles an official mailing. I mean, do you have a copy of it? I mean, how do you know?
We said that it indicates on there that according to these recordings, the mailing is going to say you need to return this, or you could be taken off of the rolls. And what our assertion is that if it is done if it is done and the presentation of it resembles government materials and could be construed as coming from a government source, which telling someone that they might be taken off of the voter rolls. I mean, who can take you off the voter rolls other than government officials?
But you don't know that this was used in the primary,
No.
but you indicate that you think it was.
I said that I do not know whether it was used in the primary or not. I can only base what we have on this recording, some of the additional documents that they have. Tim Dake says that they were planning on doing it for both the primary and the general election.
Is your understanding that the number that, if this mailing goes out, the number people are told to call is the government election?
We don't know.
What the phone number is?
Yeah, we don't know. Perhaps Mark Block can give you a copy of the mailing.
Let me ask you this, I mean, Tim Dake here is, according to you, saying we're denying their right to vote multiple times. I mean, is there, just to be a devil's advocate here, is there anything wrong with keeping anyone, be they, white, black, or whatever, from voting multiple times?
Have you seen now, and we have had the Attorney General through the Election Integrity Task Force investigating for the last 20 months. And to my understanding, we have not seen an onslaught of people voting several times. In fact, I think there's only been 2 people, and they were in the western part of Wisconsin. There has been no enormous indication of massive people voting, as Dake says, minority voters voting massive numbers of times.
Okay, but let me just ask you this. I mean, is there anything else in here where they're said specifically, where anyone says anything like, well, we need to focus on college students and minorities because we think they're the most likely to do it? Because, I mean, in this statement, I just hear him saying, well, people are going to be saying that we're denying minorities the right to vote, which is in fact what you're saying.
Yeah.
So what more is there here to say that this is what they're really targeting, as opposed to just targeting everyone?
In the recording, voter caging is illegal. I mean, targeting people, challenging voters, stopping voter fraud would be limited to preventing ineligible voters from voting. Voter caging, however, is a practice that discourages people from voting by creating a large universe of targeted voters, which is exactly what it appears from this evidence. Now, there's a quote that we have in the recordings and in the press release from Shane McVeigh, who's the head of the Eau Claire Tea Party. Quote, "I was a poll watcher from 2000 to 2006. And if you've got a university in your county or your city, students will come down in droves, and then they will all vouch for each other. I had this one kid come in 5 times with 5 separate groups of people, and this person brings in students, they're usually from Minnesota or wherever up by Eau Claire, and you go, do you live here? Yes. Well, do you have anything that shows your address? No. Then that one student says, I'll vouch for her, I'll vouch for him, and they all vote." And that's a quote from on the recording from Shane McVeigh in the Eau Claire Party.
Let me ask you this: are you saying that under federal law, this practice would be prohibited if it targets minorities, or are you saying
voter caging in general is?
You would be saying it would not be necessary to target minorities or students or any other group.
Yeah, voter caging. Yeah, the idea of sending out a mailing and telling people that they're not, their registration may be ineligible if they don't return is voter caging, and that is what is run afoul of the law.
I just want to clarify, other than the statements made by Tim Dake, have you got any sort of documentation that RPW and AFP are actually in on this?
I have, what I have here, and this is in your packet as well, and it's on the Save Wisconsin's Vote site, is a verification process used for identifying questionable addresses. And in that, which it indicates okay, let me just back up a second. In this document, which indicates step 4, that they'll be having people drive to people's homes and take photographs. It says, send completed information to RPW via John Wachlowski. John Wachlowski is the finance director and counsel for the Republican Party of Wisconsin. When you receive confirmation from John Wachlowski, receive the data, delete any and all copies of the data, wait for further instructions. Then on the back of it is an affidavit that the person is required to sign that says, have you signed the non-disclosure agreement, etc. And, quote, that I'm a Republican, that I am a volunteer on this project, and am in no way officially, quote, end quote, employed by the Republican Party of Wisconsin, we also have this document here, which is a non-disclosure and confidentiality agreement that we received that is signed already by Jonathan McCloskey, Finance Director and Chief Counsel for the Republican Party of Wisconsin.
Who are you expecting to prosecute this?
Well, we sent it to 3 different entities. We sent it to the United States Department of Justice, we sent to the U.S. Attorney's Office, Western Wisconsin, and those are being hand-delivered today. We sent it to J.B. Van Hollen, the head of the Election Integrity Task Force, and our Attorney General, and we've also sent an investigation report to the Government Accountability Board and Kevin Kennedy. That includes all the materials that we have here today, as well as the information that's on the website, which I believe is all in the packet as well.
What do you actually expect to come from this, and what would happen before the election?
Well, what we hope is that this is going to, bring about quick and firm response, a very quick and our hope is that this brings about attention and the interest of law enforcement in ensuring that the right to vote in the state of Wisconsin is protected. One of the things about voter caging is that they look at, when determining whether or not prosecution and penalties and criminal charges are brought, they look at a history and whether or not this has occurred in the past. And in 2004, there was a report from the, let me grab it here, there was a report from the Nonpartisan Campaign Legal Center that talked about this going on in Wisconsin with the Republican Party in 2004 as well. I do believe I have the penalties here, or at least like a breakdown of it. The most common penalty would be injunctive relief and oversight by the United States Department of Justice. That is, the parties would be ordered not to engage in such behavior, and the Civil Rights Division at US DOJ would monitor the organizations to make sure that unlawful practices did not repeat. Moreover, the violating organizations could be subject to fines or imprisonment, but understand that these penalties are not necessarily common, but they're used with repeat offenders who knowingly and willfully violate the law.
So, injunctive relief, are you hoping that there's poll watchers here from the U.S. Union?
What our hope is that the Americans Prosperity, Republican Party of Wisconsin, and the Tea Parties are given strict instructions about what is legal and what is not illegal, and that this is stopped, and that the activities are stopped before they are allowed to occur on election day. Now, I have every confidence that our elections are going to run fairly, smoothly, and cleanly, and that people will be able to access the polls as much as they want. And we know that, and our hope is that any effort to suppress that will be stopped in its tracks by law enforcement.
This revised draft plan, and what is this exactly, and how did you obtain it?
Again, I can't reveal, we're not going to reveal the source of our information, but we have verified as authentic as coming from the Tea Party.
So are you saying this is something that Tim Dake or other people prepared?
I do not know exactly who, but we received that as a document that is being circulated amongst them.
I mean, who was using this and for what were they using it for?
You'll have to ask them.
Just to clarify, the meeting was it June 16th or June 12th? Because we have June 16th on the press release and June 12th on this.
I believe it was the. It was the 12th.
12th?
Yeah.
So do you guys have a double agent inside these organizations? Or
We're not revealing. I appreciate your question, but we're not revealing the source of how we obtain these.
So what's going to be their explanation for this? When we call them and ask for a response, they're not going to come up and admit, oh, we were trying to break the law.
No, they're going to say, oh, we're trying to prevent voter fraud. But it's very clear, voter fraud prevention is about taking ineligible voters and making sure they don't vote. That is not what this is. This is a massive voter caging effort that involves targeting people in certain communities in Wisconsin to try and keep them from being able to exercise their right to vote. And let me just say that there is another part of this, that when they begin massive in the inner city, when they begin massive challenges to people's registrations, that ties up the polls, it creates long lines, and particularly in urban centers, where there are so many people who want to exercise their right to vote at a very small location, it creates long lines and working people are unable to exercise their right to vote, and in fact leave instead of exercising their right to vote, based on these frivolous challenges.
Because I remember what I was going to ask you, you said this method is unreliable. Can you explain why it would be unreliable to mail something to someone's address?
Yeah, because there are any number of reasons why somebody might not get a mailing at their place. I mean, people who have apartments that don't have the number on it. There could be a whole host of reasons for that. Again, it's not the Americans for Prosperity and the Republican Party and the Tea Party movement that get to determine whether or not somebody is eligible to vote and registered at the address in which they say they're registered, and that's up to the government to take care of.
Are you aware of anybody getting a questionable ruling?
I've not gotten one yet. No. And I think one thing you also want to think about is clearly the ties between these groups, as described on the audio tape, raises questions about coordination, perhaps in-kind contributions to the Republican Party of Wisconsin, and we hope that GAB would also examine this issue as part of its investigation and determine whether wrongdoing on this front occurred. The Americans for Prosperity and the Tea Party goes to enormous lengths to say, we're not affiliated with the Republicans. We are a separate organization. Just today in the newspaper, Mark Block, a former consultant for Republican candidates, is the state director of Americans for Prosperity in Wisconsin, the group that backs the Tea Party movement. Block said the Tea Party, quote, did not become a wing of the Republican Party, but they embraced us. Well, yeah, I think they're doing more than just embracing. They are in cahoots together, they are working together, and any veneer of independence has once and for all been dropped here in the state of Wisconsin. My only question is, what other states is this going on in? How far does the web go? The Americans for Prosperity is a national organization financed by the Coke industries, millions and millions and millions of dollars. And my fear is that not only is this going on in Wisconsin, but this is going on in states across the country in a well-financed corporate effort in cahoots with the Republican Party to suppress people voting on Election Day 2010. I thank you all for coming.